I am Lori Benner, Associate Vice President of Programs for the National Fair Housing Alliance. I manage our Keys Unlock Dreams initiative, which is a 3-year, 10-city initiative with 5 primary goals. And those are to remove structural barriers that perpetuate racial inequality, to expand affordable and fair housing options, to prevent an unbalanced recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, to provide prospective homebuyers and our industry partners with information, research, and resources to help them. And the overarching goal is to help close the racial homeownership and wealth gaps. The black-white homeownership gap right now is larger than it was when the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. Decades and centuries, really, of laws and policies designed to segregate and deny opportunities to people of color have landed us where we are today. And so our hope is that through our partners, like all of you here in the room, we can work together to solve these disparities, to reach a 50% Latino homeownership rate by 2024, and to create 3 million net new Black homeowners by 2030. So at this time, I would like to welcome to the stage NAFA's President and CEO, Lisa Rice.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. We've got an amazing event planned for you today. We're going to have 2 incredible panels of experts in the housing and the lending space. But not only are these panelists experts in the housing and lending sectors, they're committed to fair housing and housing equity for all Americans. And that is what makes the difference. That's why we're all here today. You know, the National Fair Housing Alliance is the nation's only national civil rights organization that is solely dedicated to eliminating all forms of housing discrimination. And we take our job very seriously. We work with all of these partners in the room to advance fair housing goals and fair housing principles. And we also work with you to help reduce the racial homeownership and wealth gaps in the United States, which, as Lori said, are too entrenched, too long-standing. In terms of the wealth gap for households with children, families with children, Black households with children have 1 penny of wealth for every $1 of wealth held by white households with children. That's 100 times the wealth. That is a huge wealth gap. In fact, if we put a pin in white wealth, if we make white wealth static so that it does not grow 1 penny more from the point where it is today, and Black wealth, the wealth of Black households continues to grow at its current rate, it would take Black households 228 years to reach parity with white households. Now, that's not by happenstance, that's not a mistake, it's by design. Our systems, our laws around the housing and lending space were put in place over the centuries with the expressed purpose, the explicit purpose of providing opportunities for white citizens and withholding opportunities or denying opportunities for people and communities of color. These laws created systems that continue to perpetuate these gaps. Systems like residential segregation, the segregation of our resources, our bifurcated or dual credit market, restrictive zoning ordinances, appraisal restrictions, right? All of these systems are working together to perpetuate the homeownership and wealth gaps. And we have got to work together to change those, and we can do it. We can do it. If we eliminate these unfair systems, it will not only benefit Latino and Black and Asian American and Native American households, it will benefit our entire society. Guess what? If we eliminate the racial wealth gap in America, we will increase our GDP by over $5 trillion over a 5-year period. That is real wealth, that's real dollars on the table, and that is why we got to get to work. Now, I shared with you that one of the main purposes that NAFA exists is to eliminate all forms of housing discrimination. And you know, in the aftermath of the Great Recession, we heard from many of our friends in the real estate community that houses that had been foreclosed on in Black and Latino communities were not being maintained well, and certainly not to the same standard as foreclosed assets in predominantly white communities. So we conducted a 4-year investigation in 61 cities throughout the United States of America. And guess what we found out? We found out that our friends in the real estate community were telling the truth. There were grave disparities and differences in terms of the way these houses were being maintained and marketed. And we identified some of the businesses that had implemented policies that were driving these disparities along racial lines. And one of those entities was Fannie Mae. So we sued Fannie Mae under the Federal Fair Housing Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And just a little while ago, we resolved our case with Fannie Mae, resulting in a $53 million settlement. And we'll be reinvesting, we'll be taking the lion's share of that settlement after attorney's fees and investing those funds into communities throughout the United States. And the city of Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, and Prince George's County, Maryland, are two of the cities, or two of the communities, two of the jurisdictions where we will be investing these funds. And so we will be working with community groups, with government, with leadership in both the District of Columbia and in Prince George's County, Maryland, to support programs and to support initiatives to expand homeownership opportunities for underserved groups. So down payment programs and closing cost assistance programs, special purpose credit programs. Those are the kinds of things that we want to support in the District of Columbia and in Prince George's County, Maryland, so that we can expand more equitable housing opportunities for underserved groups. Again, I want to thank you for coming. Like I said, we've got a list of just powerful speakers and leaders, not only at the national level, but at the local level as well. And I want to thank you all for being here. I got to give a special shout out to my girl, Lisa Ransom, who is, for those of you who don't know Lisa Ransom, she couldn't be here today. She is dealing with some health issues, but I know she is here with us in spirit. Lisa worked with the National Fair Housing Alliance to help us draft and get enacted the Dodd-Frank Act in the aftermath of the foreclosure crisis. And I think she's probably the daughter of the great Steny Hoyer, who is here with us today. And I know that Lisa's grandfather and Majority Leader Hoyer worked together closely in Congress. So thank you all. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lori.
I am absolutely thrilled to now have Prince George's County Executive, Angela also Brooks.
Good morning, everyone. I have to say, because I have the opportunity to do so on the last day of Women's History Month, happy Women's History Month to so many of the ladies here in the room today. And speaking of women, what a super bad woman we have in Lisa Rice. And I want to thank her so much for her leadership as President and CEO of National Fair Housing Alliance. We are so proud of your leadership, and thank you so much for all that you have done. And speaking of super bad women, I brought with me Angie Rogers, who is our Deputy for Economic Development in Prince George's County. We certainly want to salute her. And you heard mention just a moment ago of Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, who I have to tell you thought it not robbery at least 20 years ago. He's been celebrating women with a really beautiful luncheon that he hosts each year. Long before it was in vogue to do so, he was celebrating women with his annual event, and so I want to salute him and thank him as well. And I have to say to all of you all, I don't know about you, but I'm so excited to be a part of today's program and a part of this conversation. I know that we have talked about some challenging issues, especially over the last 2 years, about inequities, about some of the injustices that we have seen for a long time. And now I have to tell you, this is the moment we've been waiting for. I know that we are still discussing some difficulties, but boy, I am so encouraged that we are having these conversations out loud. The ones that we've been having at our tables, kitchen tables and dining room tables, and been talking among each other about some of the true injustices that we've seen. And right now, in this moment, our voices are louder and louder. And so this is a wonderful day. And I'm delighted to be here to talk about affordable housing and to celebrate this recent landmark settlement with Fannie Mae on Rio properties. That's right, this deserves a round of applause. This was a hard-fought precedent, and it will surely help to secure the vision of the Fair Housing Act for millions of Americans. And I was reading more about this settlement. There's one quote in particular that stood out to me. William Tisdale, who is president and CEO of the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council, observed that discrimination has led to diminished value of homes in Black neighborhoods and other communities of color because a family's home is often its greatest asset. Unfair practices drive the growth of the racial wealth gap. And again, I don't know how many have realized that, but the racial wealth gap, and you just heard Lisa talk about it, is so hard to overstate exactly how wide that gap really is. And you've heard that according to the study conducted by Christine Percheski at Northwestern, she said again, and it's worth repeating, that Black Americans have only 1 cent for every dollar held by white families, and Latino families are only a little better off holding only 8 cents for every $1 held by white families. This disparity is not a failure of individuals, but it is systemic. It is built to exclude certain groups of people from the American dream. Put plainly, we cannot allow the growing demand for homes to widen this gap, and we certainly cannot allow the value of these properties to fall outside of the community that they serve. What we know for sure is that when Prince George's County prospers, so should Prince Georgians. When the District of Columbia prospers, so should those who are in the District of Columbia. When our region prospers, every resident, no matter their color, creed, religion, or sex, should likewise prosper. And that's why we are so deeply committed to addressing the affordable housing needs of Prince Georgians. And I was glad to bring Angie Rogers with me because I don't think I've ever had a conversation with her about economic development where we didn't first start talking about affordable housing, because we know that as we grow and as we prosper, we can't have a real conversation about prosperity and about development without talking about affordable housing, ensuring that every person who deserves all of these opportunities has all the benefits and all the wealth that grows alongside home ownership. Prince George's is proud to be a part of a growing chorus of local governments. We've been working together collaboratively, local nonprofits, national organizations who are also focused on affordable housing. And like counties across the nation, we're focused on housing because of the historic rise that we've seen in home costs and because we anticipate that our population will grow over the coming decade. Prince George's is the fastest growing area in the state of Maryland. We grew greater than any jurisdiction in Maryland by 103,000 residents over this last census, and so we are growing steadily. We have developed a comprehensive housing strategy, and that strategy is called Housing Opportunities for All, and this strategy is helping us to guide all of our decisions as we move forward over the coming decade around housing. Just recently, we have done something for the very first time in the history of our county, and that is to exercise the right of first refusal to preserve affordable units. This program, I have to tell you, has just started, but it's already protecting hundreds and nearly thousands of our residents from rent hikes. And at the same time, we're working to increase our investment in affordable homes through our Housing Investment Trust Fund, which promotes new affordable housing and also helps to maintain existing affordable houses. And so the county in our recent budget has made substantial investments, millions of dollars in this plan, and we're working with the state also to have matching funds, and so we're growing that fund. We're also going to continue to study this issue, and so we've created a long-term framework for the Housing Opportunities for All work group, which we anticipate will allow us to chart new changes and create policies to address what we see. The affordable housing policies that we're adopting now are meant to help us capitalize on what we see as a time of rising opportunity, not just in Prince George's, but around the region. And so for millions and millions of Americans, home ownership we know is the first rung on a ladder to financial security and stability. Every American deserves this important opportunity to grow a sturdy, stable life for their families. Correcting centuries of systemic inequities takes involved public servants, nonprofit workers, and engaged activism at every level. And the history of the civil rights movement shows us that when we all work together towards a common goal, we can make change that will shake our nation. So now we're working towards the goal of economic justice, and Black Americans deserve more than 1% of every dollar that white Americans enjoy, and Latino Americans deserve more than 8 cents of every dollar that white Americans have. And so I'm so thankful to have this group of engaged policymakers and advocates who are working hard to solve this unacceptable wealth gap and to provide more Americans an opportunity for a stable place to call home. Correcting these inequities requires policy changes, legal challenges, and ultimately an engaged group of people to stand up and say enough is enough. And so I urge all of you, as the old people would say, to keep on keeping on. Let's continue to press forward, continue to listen, and keep working on this valuable goal. Because no matter what we look like, we all deserve to hear a knock on our very own door. Thank you all so much for having me today.
But what an extraordinary group of women we have recognized here. First of all, Lisa, to you, heading up this organization, powerful, powerful leadership. And then my governor, my county executive, my whatever she wants to be. Angela also Brooks, who's just doing such an extraordinary job. Now, I have done a fundraiser for one mayoral candidate in the District of Columbia. Now, the reason for that is there was never really any doubt that there was going to be a Democrat in the mayor. But you recall Muriel's first race, there was an independent that ran. And so I had a fundraiser for Muriel Bassett. But what a job she is doing, and what a team we have, and also Brooks and Barrett. And then we have a woman who's not here. Muriel's not here either, but another woman's not here, who is one tough lady, and that is the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. My former colleague, Marcia Fudge. Ajoa Samoa, is that pretty close? Yes. Is representing her here. So you tell Marcia that we are pleased that she's there. And we know that this problem that confronts this country is going to be better because of her service and leadership. Thank you very much. I ran for the state senate in 1966. Now, for most of you weren't born, so you don't really, okay, from 1966, what was that all about? And John Lewis, as a matter of fact, we're coming from the meeting, we're meeting my conference room. John Lewis is the only non-Marylander I have pictured in my conference room. The only one. All the rest are Marylanders, including Harriet Tubman, including Frederick Douglass, Thurgood Marshall, a number of other people you know. But John Lewis is in the center. And when I just came from this meeting with the Puerto Rican PROMESA board. And the reason I say that is he was a great leader on civil rights issues. And in 1966, we'd done the Voting Rights Act, we'd done public accommodations, we'd done the 57 Act, was a relatively minor act, but the first one. But in 1966, the issue in that election was fair housing. And you remember a guy named Ted Agnew. And Ted Agnew's campaign was, your home is your castle. Now, for those of you who are lawyers, or you know a lot about, your home is your castle is a very good principle. And what it means is the king can't come into your home without probable cause. But it was used by George P. Mahoney as saying you don't have to sell your home to a person of color. So, Angela, I was one of, there were 19 candidates for the state senate, only 3 of us were for fair housing. And 2 lost, I didn't. There were two senators, and the other senator was not for fair housing that was elected. I was elected in a district that George Wallace won. And I went and knocked on doors in the black community. The black community was then about 10%. 9% in Prince George County. And I was a skinny white boy. People would open their door and say, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm asking for your vote." Well, nobody's ever been here asking for my vote. And I won because the African American community, Angela, voted for me 8-9 to 1. And I won by 300 votes. So without them, I wouldn't be here. Housing is a major crisis in America. The richest country on the face of the earth. The settlement announced in February righted an injustice regarding the maintenance and marketing of certain Fannie Mae owned homes in communities of color, while creating an opportunity for more equitable investment in housing for these communities. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for the lawyers who are apparently getting a cut. You said, I'm a lawyer, that's a good thing from my standpoint. Although we have a lot of pro bono folks who are out in the front and doing a great job. So thank you for the persistent efforts of the National Fair Housing Alliance, a pillar of civil rights law, and the Fair Housing Act of '68, of which I've just spoken, can now be applied to ensure that lender-owned properties are maintained properly in every community in our country. I was glad to learn that the National Fair Housing Alliance is going to be using the settlement award to make a strong investment in fair housing in Prince George's County, Maryland, one of the great counties in our country, and very frankly, one of the most diverse and the richest, as I understand it, per capita minority county in America and perhaps the world. Prince George's County and that investment's also been made here in the District of Columbia. All Americans deserve equitable access to the tools that make home ownership and affordable renting housing possible. All Americans. The Great Recession and mortgage crisis unevenly impacted communities of color. Thanks to your research, evidence gathering, and determined legal effort, we better understand some of the factors that led to an uneven housing recovery in the years that followed, with certain neighborhoods treated differently than others by Fannie Mae. That wasn't fair. It wasn't right. I have a picture of John Lewis outside my door that on January 6th they tore up and threw away. And of course we put another one up, and it's been there ever since John passed away. And he said, if you see something that wasn't right, isn't fair, isn't just, you need to stand up. You need to speak out. You need to speak up. You need to act up. You need to get trouble. Good trouble. Good trouble is demonstrating and urging and watching and marching and speaking for things that you know are just and that are the concept of America, at the heart of America. All men, didn't say women, but clearly now, if they were writing it, they would say all men and women are created equal. Not the same, but equal. So that they cannot nor should they be discriminated against and made second-class citizens. I'm trying to get Roger Brooke Tawney removed from the outside the old Supreme Court. He wrote the Dred Scott decision. The sad thing about that decision, he admitted in that day the concept would not be the same, but in the day that it was written, he was an originalist, in other words. In 1776 or 1787, he said they would have considered people of color less than citizens, less than human beings. He was dead flat wrong, and I hope we can get that through the Senate. But the point is, we need to make sure that every American, and that's what you're doing with this legislation and with this effort of yours. Now, with February settlement, we have an opportunity to make things fairer and do right by those communities that have faced discriminatory housing practices for a very long, long, long time. This goes back even further than the Great Recession. In fact, it goes back to the founding of our country. When I started in politics back in the 60s, as I just told you, I was an advocate for fair housing because I thought the founders, in drawing up the Constitution and saying that you could not go into my home or your home as the state, as the king or the police, without probable cause, was a good, solid concept for America. But it was not a concept that should be used to discriminate in America. Practices like redlining were perpetuating two unequal Americas. One where the tools were in place for anyone to achieve the American dream, and another where those tools were replaced with barriers to building wealth and attaining economic security through home ownership. Ms. Rice was talking about, and Angela talked about, the importance of home ownership in building wealth in middle-class families. That's where we all have our wealth. Most of us don't have a lot of stocks or this, that, and the other, own a business that's growing. We own a home. And every year that goes by, that makes our wealth a little greater, unless there's discrimination and unfairness. Over the years, we've made strides as a nation by making discriminatory practices like redlining illegal. But we still confront practices and policies that lead to substantial inequality in housing affordability and access. Now, one woman named Maxine and she chairs the Financial Services Committee. The first subcommittee on which I served, I went to the Banking Committee. I'm not on a committee right now. They wouldn't appoint me on a committee, so they made me majority leader. What can I tell you? But I was on the Banking Committee and I was on the Housing Committee. And at that point in time, we started abandoning housing in America. We did not invest in housing in America. So what happened? Housing stock shrank, population went up, demand increased, housing stock did not. What happens? The price goes up. And so we are pricing certainly the lower end of the scale, but the middle end of the scale is being priced out. And we need to turn that around. And let me tell you what, Maxine Waters has been a tiger and a constant knock on the door. You talk about knock on the door. We need to change our policies. We put billions of dollars in the CARES Act and other pieces of legislation to provide better housing stock, to provide rental assistance for people. Maxine Waters. I tell you, all these women, I don't know where the men are anymore, Angela. But let me tell you, in this field, the women are leading. That's why the coalition like National Fair Housing Alliance is so important. We need to get this job done. The work you do is critical to building a better and stronger America, which is the objective of the Biden-Harris administration and of our Democratic majorities in the House and Senate, hopefully joined by a large number of Republicans. Because this is not a partisan issue. This is an issue in the greatest country on earth. Are all of our people going to have decent housing in the richest country on the face of the earth? And there needs to be a resounding yes to that question. Thank you very much.